want to start by saying I love seeing everybody's face and dropping back in to a community that, like Bobby said, really did support me as I was going through the process of growing up. Um, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are really the foundations for a good life. But what I wanted to share with you guys today, I hope it's okay to lead with, at the end of the month, I'm giving a talk on Buddhism and the Divine Feminine at the Grapevine Convention Center's DFW Divine Feminine Fest. It's free. It's Saturday, April 22nd. I think it's going to be pretty cool. So I've been doing some reading. I got some books on Quan Yin. I got some books on how feminism has showed up in Buddhism. And as I considered representations of the divine feminine archetype in Buddhism, I was drawn back time and time again to Avalokiteshvara or Quan Yin. And if you're not familiar, Avalokiteshvara or Quan Yin is the Buddhist embodiment of compassion and mercy, who first shows up historically in the 6th century, give or take, and is typically regarded as a bodhisattva or a living Buddha. So we have Siddhartha Gautama, who's our OG, right? And then we have several different bodhisattvas, living Buddhas, and Avalokiteshvara or Quan Yin is one of those. And what's interesting about Avalokiteshvara, as they are known in India, or Quan Yin, as they are known in China, is that they seem to have changed genders throughout the historical spread through Asia. Avalokiteshvara kind of walks along the tightrope of gender, sometimes trending masculine and sometimes trending feminine in representations, but always maintaining the strong embodiment of compassion and mercy. And strong embodiments of compassion and mercy. That is not an oxymoron. All too often, we think of compassion as being, soft, letting people walk all over you. Mercy is letting someone off the hook, not holding people responsible for their actions. But compassion and mercy transcend gender. And we both have elements of masculine and feminine within all of us. Secondly, compassion and mercy both include the self. And if we are letting people walk all over us, that's not very compassionate to the self, is it? And it probably starts with that, actually. As far as others go, without compassion for others, there's really not a lot of opportunity for connection with our other fellow human beings. There is a requirement of a certain amount of vulnerability, a certain amount of compassion, and both of those things lead to understanding in mutual reciprocal relationships. If we forget mercy, then we are left to hold the poison of a grudge which hurts only us and doesn't even do anything to the person who wronged us most of the time. So how can we be compassionate and merciful without taking that in the wrong direction, without letting people walk all over us? I want to use this time to introduce the idea of loving firmness, which I adored since the first time I read it in a book and have since read in several books. Loving firmness, very, very similar to loving kindness, expresses love and compassion without compromising personal boundaries. And I personally believe that holding strong boundaries is actually the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and for those in our lives. And the real reason is because look what happens when we don't. If I keep saying yes to things that I cannot provide, whether it's time or energy or money that I don't have, what I'm really doing is planting seeds of resentment. Every time I say yes, but really I'm thinking, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this, I can easily begin to resent someone I love for taking time, energy, money that I really need to spend somewhere else. And I begin to feel like all other people are doing is taking, taking, taking. And really, good interpersonal connections are something a lot more abundant. And it's not a zero-sum game. In good interpersonal connections, we can both show up, give a little to a conversation, and get a lot out of it. We really have three different kinds of interactions with other people. And in one of those interactions, I give to you and I feel like something has been taken away from me and you gain something. Secondly, you give to me where you feel taxed or drained and I got something from that. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you just need to vent and have somebody listen. And sometimes you're the one who's doing the listening and you can hold space and use a little bit of your energy to hold space for somebody who really needs a good vent session or a helping hand. But we have this third type of interpersonal connection where both of us show up, give a little bit of time and energy, and both of us walk away with more. And it's really what I like to call emotional alchemy, because we started with a little and we ended up with a lot. And one of the ways that we can maximize this sort of interaction as compared to the other types of interactions where somebody is being drained as somebody else is getting filled up is by setting good boundaries. And good boundaries are protecting our time, our energy, our money, which in turn protects our sense of peace. And if we don't have that sense of peace, if we're not protecting that, how can we spread peace in the world? Isn't that kind of what we're here to do, those of us following this path? How can we share something we don't have? So there's a lot of good reasons to hold boundaries. A good boundary does a few things. Firstly, it clarifies our side of the street without attempting to control others, which is ultimately a very futile attempt if you've tried. Taking my background, an example of a good boundary is asking if there will be alcohol at a party, and if there is, maybe I choose not to go. So I'm not demanding that the host change their behavior, especially for me. I'm not getting upset when they don't change their behavior for me. I am looking at what's on my side of the street, gathering information, and taking actions on my side of the street from there. So that's a good boundary. We have the ability to control what happens on our side of the street, and others have the right to make decisions off their own accord. Kind of see the difference here. We're not making demands of other people. We're choosing where we spend our time, our energy, our efforts, our money. Secondly, a good boundary speaks up sooner rather than later. Rather than waiting until I am uncomfortable with the situation that I'm in and noticing, in myself that there is anger here, although that's a very mindful thing to do. I don't like to say I am angry because that sounds like I am 100% filled with anger. I really like the phraseology of, there is anger present here, which suggests that, I am noticing a feeling. But a good boundary speaks up as soon as possible. Of course, this is not always possible. Sometimes other people cross our boundaries and they don't know it. And the only way they know is because we tell them. I had an experience like this recently. Someone I was chatting with called me a pet name that I would usually reserve for not that person. And I didn't realize until that moment that I did not want to be called that name by that person. And so I called a timeout and I asked them nicely, can you not call me that, please? That's making a request of another person, which is something we can do. I can't ultimately change that other person. So if they keep doing the thing that I don't like, I then have the choice if I remove myself from that situation. Lastly, good boundaries can change over time. We have the universal truth of impermanence. And just because you feel okay with something at one time doesn't mean that you'll feel okay with it at another time. And that's okay. That's why communication is fluid. It changes over time. We can clarify, oh, I don't want this right now, but maybe tomorrow, or maybe when I have more energy. And that's still a good boundary. Things change. But perhaps most importantly, a good boundary also communicates love. And that's really important to remember because sometimes it can feel like a boundary is saying, stay away, don't call me that. Don't show up at my house without asking. But it's not really saying stay away. It's saying, I care about you. I want to spend time with you. And here are the ways that we can do that make us both feel comfortable in that time. Because if we don't do that, we end up with a lot of interactions where one person is getting something and the other person is being drained. And those interactions are not very sustainable because eventually one person will be drained kind of until the end of their rope. And that makes it very difficult not to kind of lash out, to feel like your patience is thin and to say things or do things that you really don't mean to. So setting good boundaries is really how we practice compassion, both to ourselves and to others in our life. If you're interested in deep diving into self-compassion, I highly recommend Kristen Neff. She's the real expert on the topic. She has several books. She has a website. And I highly recommend looking into her books if you struggle with self-compassion, self-esteem, that sort of thing. But what about mercy? Now, mercy, or showing forgiveness, seemingly starts with the desire to forgive those who have hurt or wronged us. But, and maybe this is just me, what if you don't desire, if you don't have that desire to forgive? I struggle with this. I don't always want to forgive. And that becomes the biggest block on that road. And it's true. Sometimes you are truly wronged by someone. Sometimes somebody goes out with bad intentions and hurts somebody else. And sometimes that somebody else is you. Mercy doesn't invalidate the wrong, and it doesn't forget about it. But it does invite you to let go of carrying its weight into the future. If you're at all like me and you struggle with a desire, the first part of showing mercy, maybe you can at least recognize that mercy makes the best of a bad situation. Mercy is what relinquishes that power that someone else has over you. And if, kind of like me, you tend to stay angry at that person, you really don't want them to have power over you. So, in a circular sort of way, you can kind of be like, I'll show you. I am going to let go of this hurt, and then you can't affect me anymore. See? So there's ways around it if you also don't have that desire to forgive. And even better, mercy prevents the inevitable growing pains that happen in relationships, and it prevents them from accumulating over time. Mercy is what kind of clears the air and brings us back to baseline. If we didn't have mercy, every cumulative hurt that happens in a relationship stacks on top of each other and has that accumulated effect over time. It gets to be very heavy. If we have mercy, we're giving ourselves, we're giving that relationship a perpetual fresh start, even after we might hurt each other on purpose or by accident. So how can we actually embody this? It always helps me to remember that there are probably a number of reasons why people act the way they do. People often act out of fear and a desire to protect themselves. We tend to judge ourselves by our intentions and others by the outcomes of their intentions. However, there are many times when we do things with good intentions, where the outcome is not what we would expect. You know, we compliment somebody on a feature that they're really self-conscious about, and we make them feel awkward. We point out something that somebody would rather not have pointed out, either from curiosity or from just not knowing or not thinking. So sometimes we can act with good intentions, and we know we have good intentions, but the outcome is, ooh, you know, that looked like it stung. So what happens if we extend some of that grace to those we encounter? Sometimes I walk around with an invisible disability, and sometimes I walk around with a visible disability. And let me tell you, you get treated very differently, having walked around in the world in both of these capacities. And it really, really bothered me at first to get comments when I am walking around with a visible disability. But when I give people the benefit of the doubt, when I give them the grace of curiosity, of not knowing and not thinking, I can be very soft in response to those questions, those comments, those assumptions. And it kind of rolls off my back like water off a duck. I hear a question I don't like. I hear a comment I don't like. I get a finger I don't like. And I remind myself, you know, these people are probably curious. They probably don't know. They're probably not thinking. And then it becomes okay. And similarly, when you're the one on the other side of that exchange, wouldn't you want to be given a little bit of grace in that circumstance? Like, oop, everybody knows what it's like to say something and immediately realize that you shouldn't have said that. Can there be a little bit of grace in those encounters? And there are, in fact, times when we are the ones who need forgiveness and mercy. Here, once again, we only have control over our side of the street. We can beg and pray and hope for forgiveness from somebody else, and other people may or may not be willing to forgive us. And we have to learn how to be okay with that. But in a circular sort of fashion, can we use the strategies that we touched on earlier to forgive people for their lack of forgiveness? Sometime in their life, they probably learned the lesson that people will hurt you again and again given the chance, which is a lesson that some of us learn from life experience. And more often than not, they're probably just trying to protect themselves by saying, ooh, I'm not going to let this person hurt me again. And that's okay. Can we be okay with that lack of forgiveness? Can we forgive ourselves for whatever hurtful outcome may have happened, regardless of our intentions? So now we can see that these qualities are really not soft. Softness, to me, in the negative connotation, implies kind of rolling over, giving up, just letting things happen the way they will. But compassion and mercy really take fortitude. And they're really very challenging but worthwhile qualities to embody at times. Sometimes the hardest thing to say is nothing when we really, really want to get in the last word. But when we can embody the qualities of compassion, including and especially self-compassion, when we can embody mercy in the form of forgiveness, including self-forgiveness when we are the ones in need of forgiveness, we are really doing a service to the world around us. We are showing others that it is okay to be soft in the positive connotation of the word. It's safe. Some of you might know that until I find a better one, my goal in this life is to be a good role model. And I feel like it helps keep me on a good path because it means that I have to take care of myself. If I am not taking care of myself, well, I'm not being a very good role model, am I? And maybe you like this goal too. I like this goal because it asks me to step up, to be like Avalokiteshvara / Quan Yin, to embody mercy and compassion everywhere I go. So if you take anything away from tonight, I want you to take away the idea that embodying compassion and mercy are strong virtues, that they are a process that we practice especially when life hands us challenges, also known as opportunities for growth. And also that it has a multiplicative effect in the world. We all benefit when we give each other permission to act with compassion and mercy. And if I leave you with any homework, it's to recognize those moments that you prickle and see what happens when you respond with compassion instead. Just see what happens. Anytime I change my behavior, I like to think of it like running an experiment. I try it for a month. And if I don't like it, I go back to whatever I was doing before. No harm done. But there is great power in compassion and mercy. And tapping into that power, I believe, can have a big ripple effect. So thank you guys for giving me the time to speak on compassion and mercy. If you want to hear a deep dive on Buddhism and the divine feminine, focusing on Avalokiteshvara / Quan Yin, you can find me at the Grapevine Convention Center on Saturday, April 22nd for the DFW Divine Feminine Fest. I hope I see you guys there. And I can't wait to chat with you guys after the talk tonight. Thank you so much for the time.